Hiring managers of Reddit, what's your favorite? They were perfect until we Googled them. Story. I was interviewing a chef for my business. The interview went great, and he had an excellent resume. Worked at some of the top restaurants in the world, 3 Michelin star type places. Even did a short cooking test with some spare ribs and they were incredible. There was some stiff competition though, so eventually we decided to look at everyone's Facebook profiles. One of his old profile pics was him at a Mardi Gras parade dressed as Pikachu with a big dildo strapped on. He got the job. Everything looked good on her resume, she was very professional and enthusiastic in her interview and just had that thing. That self-starter attitude that made you feel like this girl is going to get shit done. Well, ran a background check and literally nothing checked out. She was not actually licensed in her field like she claimed, and she had about a dozen priors for various white-collar crimes and none of her work history or references checked out. I guess she was just hoping that her charisma would win us over and that we wouldn't bother checking up on her. You'd be surprised how many employers don't. Edit. Wow. This is now my highest rated comment. I was a restaurant manager and the owner hired this guy as a chef without doing basic research, which he did a few times. Anyways, the guy said he had won several awards and worked with celebrities, etc. The guy was a total dick to everyone on staff. I decided to Google him. First hit as a mugshot from a drug arrest. Then more articles, one about where he lied about getting a James Beard Award from a previous restaurant he worked at. A comment about him owing $25,000 or something to his former boss. The only positive restaurant review he had was from 1990. I came in after the weekend to show my boss this stuff, when I learned he was fired the night before for exposing himself to one of the waitresses. The GOAT. This kid, early 20s, comes in for a job, seemed normal enough. Google him and he was wanted in another state for stabbing a Saint Bernard to death. Fuck that guy. I share my dad's name. So when you Google my name you pull up his exploits, stuff like being arrested for having 7 semi-trucks worth of weed in his driveway. Thanks Dad. This is why I'm glad my parents didn't name me after my grandpa. Since my uncle is also named after my grandpa, and uncle is like a heroin addict and rapist. Where does someone get 7 trucks full of weed? They grow it on a 20-square-mile ranch in West Texas. The thing is, he got off on it because by the time the trial came around all of the weed was gone. But that wasn't even a blip on the radar compared to all of his other very public, very illegal exploits. So when does the movie come out? I think his latest prison stint was the result of kidnapping, and threatening to kill some kid that was dating a cousin of his or something, although before that I believe he made headlines for paying a police department $290,000 as a fine in hopes it would keep him out of jail. It did not keep him out of jail. Sounds like a shitty mob boss. Pretty much lol. That's what happens when you have had virtually unlimited funds that you never had to work for all your life, and then think gangsters are cool. Doesn't running a 20 miles squared weed ranch count as working for something? Illegal work, but it still takes effort. Really nice, clean-cut young man from the nearby college applies in my shop. Sweet, friendly, outgoing and smart. He was perfect. Until we Googled him. He had a last name that was the same as a girl I had gone to school with. So I Googled his name, found his Facebook and discovered that he was actually her little brother. I immediately called my friend, his sister, and said, "Hey, your brother just applied in my shop. I'm gonna hire him." She said, "Sweet. Free ice cream." So he was perfect until I Googled him. And then he was even better. He worked for me for 2 years and was a delight. Hiring private tutors to work with middle school students. Had a great conversation with a girl. She stressed how much she wants to be a role model for young girls, basically exactly what we were looking for. Then I Googled her and the first picture on her Facebook is her doing a line. Who the hell posts themselves doing a line on Facebook and keeps it public? Cocaine apart, she doesn't sound bright enough to private tutor anyone. Oh, I've got a good one. We had hired a new entry-level graphic designer. Let's call him Will. He had talent and a decent portfolio, but there were some strange things right from the beginning. For example, he would always come in wearing expensive suits, despite our being a jeans and t-shirt office, and his having a very low-paid position. We didn't care much about that. No clue how he affords that wardrobe, but that's none of our business. He's a designer, and I guess he likes to look nice. The weirdest thing was that he adamantly refused to accept direct deposit for his paycheck. He wanted a physical check every other week. Strange, but okay. Designers are eccentric sometimes. So, one evening we're all working really late on a project together. We've got some bottles of wine around, some pizzas, etc. It's miserably long hours, but we're a good team and having a good time. All of a sudden Will looks up from his computer and fucking runs as fast as he can out the door. Not a word to any of us, he just dashes out. We all look at each other, try calling him, etc., with no answer. We finish up the project and go home still wondering what happened. The next day Will doesn't come into work. He doesn't come in the next day either. We try calling his emergency contact, but don't get any response there either. So we Google him, and see the FBI press release. Turns out he was arrested about 500 miles from our office a few hours after he ran out. I guess he got a tip that the FBI was onto him and decided to make a run for it. Turns out he had been defrauding payroll companies for years, to the tune of about $1 million. That's why he didn't want direct deposit for his paycheck. What he didn't know was that we processed our physical checks through the same payroll company as our direct deposit, and they reported his new address to the FBI. Oops. Edit. Because people keep asking, I described his scheme in subcomment et. As far as I know, he wasn't trying to scam our company. He was either trying to hide out for a while, or he had burned through his stolen money and needed to get a job. Another edit. Because people keep asking, a more detailed description of the scam he was running is a thread at. I was hiring for our late night shifts ending at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and she was willing to work anything and looking for about 25 hours per week. This was absolutely what the company was looking for. She had mentioned that she was grieving her little boy who passed 2 weeks ago and needed to do something to occupy her time. She finished her 1 day of computer training and stopped showing up. Later in the week she sent me an email stating that she wasn't ready to come back to work like she'd thought, which was understandable. My assistant manager and I decided to look her up, only to find that she had multiple GoFundMe pages set up for her sob story with different amounts of time that the supposed child had been dead for. Her Facebook was full of selfies and party photos. She ended up asking for the job back a few months later and we shot her down pretty quick. Edit. I've recently Googled her name and found that all the GoFundMe pages have been taken down and her social media profiles deleted, privatized. The story took place early last year. Faking GoFundMe stories is illegal. The manager at my last apartment complex stole all the money everyone paid for rent and bought coke with it. She later ended up pretending she had brain cancer and made a GoFundMe, and the neighborhood community had a fundraiser for her and she was in the news. Everyone eventually found out she was faking and she had to go to court. Edit. Here is a link to the news article. We had a near miss, one senior hire. We were talking about him and how something seemed a little off when we Googled him. It was like he didn't exist at all, and the odd super positive tidbit of information that was always a bit too much of a stretch to be completely believable. I mean, 1 or 2 people saying you're the best thing on earth is one thing, but this was like all you got were these sporadic and manic observations. One of the junior members of the team pipes up at this point. She's overheard what we're talking about. Turns out she's worked the last 2 places he's worked and he's like a locust. He's extremely good at his job but an absolute nightmare in all other ways. Sexual harassment, bullying, turning up wasted. He has a really niche skill set, there are always more roles than people to fill, so he hops along, bullies everyone out of their role in his team, brings in his entourage to the point where almost anyone normal rage quits because the atmosphere is so toxic. Then when HR try and step in, he hits them with a constructive dismissal case and drags lawyers in so there's no paper trail. She said he'd done it at her last job and the one before. It's one of those things that once you know, you start to notice stuff. So at events when somebody mentioned this guy's name, half the table would just give each other a look and the others would have no idea. It's not quite an open secret, but it's definitely on the grapevine anecdotally if not formally. Glad we dodged that bullet. Please tell me that junior member got a little something for saving your asses. An attagirl and probably didn't get a raise that year. Your joke is too true to be funny. It's the type of humor that reminds you to update your resume. Had a guy apply for an NRT level post with us recently. His CV was okay, so we offered him an interview. Social media seemed okay too. He never turned up for the interview. A couple of weeks later, there's a story about him in the local paper. Turned out that he was living at the local boarding house, and was found in the kitchen one morning totally wasted, wearing nothing but a pair of socks. When a couple of women who also lived there tried to escort him back to his room, he got violent and assaulted them. Given the dates stated in the paper, he didn't turn up because he'd been in jail at the time of the interview. His resume has now been added to the "Do Not Touch with a 10-Feet Barge Pole" section in our filing cabinet. His resume has now been added to the "Do Not Touch with a 10-Feet Barge Pole" section in our filing cabinet. I'm envisioning watching your entire office trying to open the cabinet and insert his paper with 11-feet barge poles, as no one is allowed to touch anything in there and none of you want to take a chance. There are bells attached to the drawer, so if anybody tries to access it, the secretary comes running with a 11-feet pole and smacks the offender on the hands and closes the drawer, all while hissing menacingly. I was interviewing a much older guy for a similar position of mine. Everything seemed okay, and he was our best candidate. Before moving forward, I did a quick Google search to only find out that he was fired from his previous job because of stealing $5,000 worth of computer equipment. My director hired him anyway. Well, he's already got the equipment he needs, we should be fine. Someone popped my guild cherry, thank you kind stranger. Not the hiring manager, but I was the intern responsible for checking references and running backgrounds at our company, and this was in my first week where I was just learning how to go about things. This guy did great in the interview, so I got the go-ahead to run a background check and call his references. Something popped up in his background, so I had to call the police station to figure out how to get a copy of the police report, since whatever happened had just happened. I talked to someone on the phone and gave them his name and who I was and what I was calling for. After doing so, whoever I was talking to didn't know how to go about obtaining the information on her end. She put me on a brief hold, then took a call back number and promised to call me back with some info. Well, it's a good thing neither of us knew what to do, because I received a call from the police department less than an hour later. An officer told me, "I'm really not supposed to be doing this, but I just wanted to let you know that _interview guy_ had been arrested for carjacking a woman, and that woman works at your company." He saw the company name and the guy's name and warned us. I'm so grateful too. Edit, woohoo. My first gold. Wubbalooba dub dub bb. Edit 2, let me clarify the timeline a bit. The woman was already working here, the guy applied, had a phone interview, then got called for an in-person interview, and while we were still interviewing other candidates, this is when the crime was committed, so by the time I got a green light to pull the background check so that we could offer employment, it had been at least a month. An officer told me, "I'm really not supposed to be doing this, but I just wanted to let you know that interview guy had been arrested for carjacking a woman and that woman works at your company. If you hired him, they could have carpooled." I wasn't the hiring manager, but my teammate was. A candidate came through that he and some other members interviewed and seemed pretty okay for the job until they checked her out. Turns out she was suing the company, yes, the one she applied for a job for, so my teammate ended up not hiring her. I interviewed a girl who seemed nice, then after passing her off to HR I looked her up. Her name came up as having been fired from the local PD for possession of, among other things, 150 grams of cocaine. Edit 2, there was a redacted article here. But that wasn't anonymous enough. Also, the article one just found is a bit more in-depth than the one I'd previously seen. I wasn't the hiring manager, but I was talking to him about a couple interviews he had coming up. He said he looked up one guy and found that he'd been arrested previously for various identity theft, credit card fraud crimes. This position involved taking payments from customers, among other things, so obviously this guy would not be hired, but that had to be an awkward interview. Good resume, former military. We were going to call him in for an interview but Googled him first. Turns out he was arrested for arms trafficking. The report said he had stolen 2 or 3 small arms as well as a Stinger missile system from the base he was stationed at. The people he set up to sell the stuff to were undercover officers. Edit: I just asked the other manager if he remembered that guy's name so I could find the report. He doesn't, but he reminded me that some other stuff that was listed as being in his possession were a number of flak jackets and a Humvee. I am going to keep trying to find it and will update if I do. Edit 2: Getting a lot of questions and I will try to answer them later because I am busy cooking and setting up for the baby shower tomorrow. Also, I think I might have found the article. If this is it, I remembered some things slightly different because it was a long time ago, but it is still no less absurd. I am waiting on the other manager to get back to me to see what he thinks. I will update in a third edit whenever he gets back to me, so stay tuned. Sounds like someone who takes personal initiative to solve problems and build business. Maybe could use more training. Turns out he was arrested for arms trafficking. The report said he had stolen 2 or 3 small arms. That could happen to anybody, just a simple misunderstanding and an overzealous prosecutor screws the guy over. As well as a Stinger missile system. Well, that escalated quickly. Pre-Google era, but I think it fits the question. Family owned a trucking company. Literally everyone in my immediate family has or had a CDL. Mom's turn to take the newbie for a road test pre-hire. During the road test, they were involved in an accident. They were hit while stopped. The company was based out of Indiana. Accident happened in Illinois. Newbie gets arrested on the spot. Come to find out he has warrants that hadn't been out long enough for the background check service we used to get them yet. One of the warrants, stalking a female dispatcher from the previous trucking company he worked for. Edit: for clarity, the warrants were from Illinois. Thanks for watching our video. If you like it, please smash the subscribe and like button to support the channel, so that we can create more quality content in the future.